Hey, I'm going to talk about all the manga and comics that I read last year in 2024. It's more than I expected there to be. It took me a while to set all this up. My back is kind of aching after looking at all these books, especially like look how thick this thing is. That was heavy. That was heavy. I was planning on including all the books that I read this year too, but after dragging all this downstairs and putting it in a pile here, I was like, you know what? This is good enough. I'll just talk about the comics and manga. And I might be overstepping by even talking about comics here too, because I don't think I've ever talked about those on the channel. It's been pretty manga focused so far. And I don't know if any of y'all even care about this stuff to begin with, but I mean, I read a lot of it. They both have words and pictures and stuff, so I figured I'd talk about them because why not? So, all right, I'll start with the manga, and there's more manga I read digitally too that I'll talk about. This isn't even all of it. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I better hustle through all these. I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about everything on here or anything. I tried to keep it to like 30 seconds or less per series. So, okay, here we go, manga. First up, Tropic of the Sea. This is by Satoshi Kon, who did Perfect Blue, Paprika, a lot of other really good movies. My favorite anime movie director. He also did manga. I think this was his first manga. It is about this kid on the front who is trying to save mermaids from evil business tycoons. And it's a one volume deal. I thought it was pretty good for being one volume. It had a lot of heart, good characterization, but I mean, nowhere near as good as the man's movies. If you haven't consumed anything by him, start with his movies instead of this. GTO The Early Years. The more popular series, Great Teacher Onizuka, is the follow-up to this. This series, it's about two delinquent high school boys. They're in a biker gang. They get into all kinds of shenanigans, and so it's mostly a comedy series, but has some more serious arcs. It's definitely rough at times, big flaws in this series, but overall, I had a lot of fun with it. I thought that the characters were likable, and I'm gonna read the follow-up series as well. Not Simple. This is a one-volume series about this kid on the cover who goes on a journey to reunite with his sister, and a bunch of really bad, sad stuff happens to him. This is kind of in line with Goodnight Pun Pun and The God's Lie and series like that, which are all about sad things happening to people. I didn't care for it too much. I thought the prologue was really good, and then I just kind of lost interest after that. But this series does have a lot of fans, so if it sounds like your kind of thing, go check it out. Blade of the Immortal. This is an all-time classic samurai manga, one of the best series I've ever read in my life. A new favorite of mine. If you watched my top 5 manga that I read in 2024 video, this was my number one pick. I loved it a lot, and I went on and on in that video about how much I love this series. So I don't want to do that again and bore you to death, but the gist of it is it's really good, and you should go check it out. Blood on the Tracks. It's a really tense horror series about a boy and his disturbing mother. I read through it for the first time a couple years ago, but it wasn't done yet. And now that it's finished, I decided to go back and read through the whole thing. And I really liked it. I thought the ending was really great. Oh, also, it's worth pointing out that I only owned the first 8 volumes, and there's like 17 total or something. Also, this would have made the top manga I read in 2024 video, but it already made my top manga I read in whatever year I first read this video, so I couldn't put it in the new one because it can't be in 2 videos. That's just too much. Land of the Lustrous. This just ended last year, and I binged the whole thing right afterwards. I think the last volume isn't out in English yet, but I read it online and read all these physically. It's a mystery series. Gem people fight moon people, and there's a dark, lingering mystery in the background. It's a little slice of lifey at first, and then it gets more and more dramatic as it goes on. I liked it a lot. Message to Adolf. It's a historical fiction series about 2 boys, both named Adolf. One of them's Jewish, one of them's German, and their friendship and the build-up to World War II. It's it's a really heartbreaking series, of course, very disturbing, but not in like a over-the-top crazy way or anything. It's just one where you finish it and you just feel empty inside, but it's really good. If you can handle that sort of thing, go check it out. Destroy All Humans. They Can't Be Regenerated. This is a slice of life romance manga about Magic the Gathering. I don't like any of those things, but the creative team behind this, I've really enjoyed some of their other stuff they've made. So I checked this out purely based off of that, and I actually really liked it. The second volume just came out a couple days ago, and I'm planning on, continuing to read it. It's quite good. Go-Go Monster, probably the fanciest looking manga volume in existence. It's also a very good story. It's about a lonely boy who can see monsters that no one else can see. It's very creative, very unique. It's by Taiyo Matsumoto, and if you know him, he's known for stuff that's very creative and very unique, and this is no exception. Ping Pong, this is the first Taiyo Matsumoto thing I ever read, and it really sold me on him. It's a sports series that grapples with this central question of what if you devote your entire life to something and you still lose at it anyway? And it's fascinating. There's just some really great character work here. This was neck and neck with Blade of the Immortal as my favorite manga that I read last year, and I highly recommend it. Nijigahara Holograph. This is one of the most disturbing Inyo Asano works, which is saying a lot because that man has written a lot of really disturbing stuff. This is straight up a horror manga. There's just all kinds of dark, twisted stuff happening in here. It's also very surreal. It's a non-linear narrative. I didn't quite understand everything that happened in here, but it was interesting. I think I'll definitely read it again and see if I get more out of it and understand it more. Wolverine Snicked. This is by Tsutomu Nihei, one of my favorite manga creators. He did Blom and Biomega and stuff like that. Does a lot of really dark, atmospheric cyberpunk stories, and this is just a traditional setup for a Tsutomu Nihei manga, but Wolverine's in it. If you want to see Wolverine fight a bunch of messed up looking robot guys with not much dialogue, that's what you're going to get here, and I like that kind of stuff, so I dug this. I also read bits and pieces of several other series like Real, Jujutsu Kaisen, Planetes, but I figured that I'd save my thoughts on those for a later video after I've read a more significant chunk of those. So here we go. Let's move on to the manga that I don't own physically. Elfen Lied. I used to own this physically, and after reading it, I decided I did not need to own it anymore. Look, it wasn't terrible or anything. I didn't hate it. But, okay, well, I'll give you the premise. It's basically about these creatures called Diclonii and how humans take advantage of them and do awful things to them and stuff. And if you know anything about this series, it's really edgy. It is very upfront about being incredibly edgy. And it is dumb. I'm not gonna lie. It's a pretty dumb series. There were moments where I was reading and I was just actively embarrassed by what I was seeing on the page. But it had its merits. There was some striking imagery. I think that the core plot itself was actually very good. I just wish that it didn't have some of the other nonsense that went on in it. Materu no Komochi, I probably butchered that name, but this is by the guy who did Gantz and Inuyashiki, and I read this solely based off of how I liked his other work a lot. And yeah, this wasn't my favorite. It's about this shut-in who falls in love with his stepmom. It was like, just imagine reading a manga that's just the romance parts of Gantz and nothing else. Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. Welcome Back, Alice. This was really good. This was by Shuzo Oshimi, the Blood on the Tracks guy. And this has all of the classic Shuzo Oshimi hallmarks. It's about teenagers, and there's a lot of tension and a lot of wordless panels and stuff. It's very, very Oshimi-like. And this is probably his most personal work, I'd say. It deals with gender a lot. And if you read the author afterwards, he pours his heart out in those. He's getting very personal. And I think that this is up to par with some of his best work, for sure. Hajime no Ippo, I did not read this whole thing because it's 1,000,000 volumes long and still going. But I read the first 12 volumes, I believe. And it was enthralling. I loved it. So good. I'm going to keep reading for sure. I read, the first 12 volumes is the first tournament arc or so. And yeah, after Ashita no Joe, I needed a new boxing manga in my life, and I'm happy to see that this one's just gonna go on forever. So I'll always have a nice boxing manga to read. And then lastly, Kingdom. I don't know how much Kingdom I read this year, but I'm up to around volume 50, I believe, and it's been very good. I said in another video that up to where I am right now, this is the best manga I've ever read in my life. There's still a lot more I have yet to read, so it might not stay the best manga I've ever read in my life, but I'm just impressed by how it's been this good for 500 chapters or whatever I've read, and I'm excited to keep reading it. Alright, on to the comic books. First up is Alias. This is the first Jessica Jones series. I thought this was great. I liked it a good bit more than that TV show they came out with a while ago. And yeah, this is this is part of the Marvel Max imprint with explicit content. So it's gritty. It deals with some heavy themes that a lot of other Marvel series don't touch, and they say bad words and stuff. Runaways. This is in the Marvel universe, but it's pretty self-contained. You don't need to know anything before reading this, and it's about this group of kids who realize that their parents are supervillains, and they decide to fight against them and stuff. And I thought this was a lot of fun. The author of this, Brian K. Vaughan, he's written some other stuff that I really liked, so I had to check this out. And I didn't read all of it. There's a couple more volumes I have left, but the end of volume 3 was a pretty good stopping point, so yeah, I had a good time. Avengers by Jonathan Hickman. This is absolutely phenomenal. Hickman, I'd say, is probably the best ideas guy in comic books. Every time I read one of his series, I'm just blown away by how this man's mind works. And this is no exception. This is just a grand scale sci-fi epic with all kinds of creative things happening left and right. And I absolutely loved it. And it culminates in Secret Wars, which was also amazing. And I've heard people say that this is basically the ending of the Marvel universe, that, you know, they should have just ended Marvel Comics forever after Secret Wars, because it's never going to get any better than this. And, I don't think they should stop making them forever, but I do agree that I don't think there's ever going to be a better ending for Marvel than what was in here. This was quite something. Immortal Hulk. I'm not really a big Hulk guy, but I heard a lot of hype around this series and decided to check it out, and it lived up to the hype. It's something else. It's like a horror sci-fi inspired Hulk series with lots of elements from the biblical Book of Job. It just, it's different. And I liked it a lot. Al Ewing, this man did not have to go this hard writing the Hulk, but he did, and I was very impressed by it. Daredevil, End of Days. Daredevil's one of my favorite superheroes. Love this guy. And this is kind of an alternate universe take on him. This book opens up with Daredevil dying, right like on the first page. He's dead, and people are trying to solve his murder and figure out what happened and stuff. So it's an interesting premise. And I felt that this book started out really good and then petered out towards the end. So overall, it was okay. I'm glad I read it, but it was just all right. Daredevil by Ed Brubaker. So Daredevil by Bendis is one of my favorite comic book runs of all time. Absolutely phenomenal series. And that ends with a really big cliffhanger. They put Daredevil in a really interesting situation. And then Ed Brubaker here picks up right where that run leaves off. And the beginning, where Daredevil is in this interesting situation, I thought that part was very good. And then after he got out of that situation, this series was still pretty good, but not quite at the same level as earlier. I also read the run that comes after this, Daredevil by Andy Diggle, and that was some junk. It was absolutely terrible. Worst read of the year for me. Thankfully it was short, so that was nice, but yeah, no real redeeming qualities outside. Oh man, that was something else. I had to take a break from Daredevil for a bit after that. I love Daredevil so much, and I had to, man, I don't even want to think about it. Anyway, moving on. Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is also really bad. This is the era that directly follows Spider-Man selling his marriage to the devil. And so Spider-Man's newly single. He has this mostly new cast of characters that I didn't care about at all. And he has all new villains, too. There was an editorial mandate that they couldn't use the old Spider-Man villains. So they came up with new ones, and they're all lame. And there's just really dull stories being told here. Nothing's good. It's all, yeah. Didn't like it. Thankfully, I did read a little bit past this volume I have, and it gets better. They bring back the old villains, and it just gets inherently more interesting after that. When you get to the New Ways to Die arc with Venom and stuff, I thought that stuff was kind of good. Maybe I'm just getting Stockholm Syndromed into liking this era of Spider-Man because I read it for too long. I don't know. I'll keep reading it. It is getting better. I don't know. I just didn't like Spider-Man selling his marriage to the devil. I think that was a bad move on his part. Gotham Central. I thought this was really great. It's about the lives of police officers in Gotham City. And it's just really interesting viewing this crazy city through the lives of, ordinary people instead of Batman. And I just found it fascinating. When these supervillains show up in this, it feels like a big deal because these are just normal people having to go up against them and stuff. And also, this is a self-contained series, as a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's just expertly plotted all the way through. I loved it. Stormwatch. This is the prelude series to The Authority, which they're supposed to be making a movie of later on. And this is Image 90s edgy superhero comics, but this is the Citizen Kane of Image 90s edgy superhero comics because this is pretty well written. There's some very interesting story arcs in here, and it does one of the gutsiest moves I've ever seen in comics, which I'm not going to say too much about, but there's a crossover with Aliens at the very end. Like Aliens, the Xenomorphs, the movie franchise. And normally when comic books do crossovers like that, they don't matter at all. But the Aliens crossover is legitimately the most important to the plot issue of this whole series. And I thought that was amazing that they did that. I read the first half of Thor by Walter Simonson. And I'm just going to say out the gate, I'm really not a Thor guy at all. Like, just the dudes with swords and stuff talking in faux Shakespearean, it's just not my thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not for me. But this is such a critically acclaimed run, I decided to check it out. And I liked it for the most part. I think that this is, very well written. But, yeah, some of the faux Shakespearean dudes with sword stuff, I mean, it dragged it down a bit for me, but I loved the sci-fi stuff in here with Beta Ray Bill, and then it culminates in this big fight in this volume that I thought was really cool, so I'll continue to check it out. JSA The Golden Age. This is an alternate universe story about the Justice Society, written by James Robinson, who did Starman, and this is the first JSA-related thing I ever read. Green Arrow The Longbow Hunters. I think this was the first Green Arrow thing I've ever read, too, outside of when he showed up at the very end of Dark Knight Returns and what he did in Identity Crisis and stuff. I think this is my only Green Arrow experience. This was very gritty. I think this was revolutionary at the time because Green Arrow hadn't really been written like this before. I don't know diddly squat about Green Arrow, so I might be completely wrong, but this seemed like it was a shift in how Green Arrow was perceived. 100 Bullets, Brother Lano. This is a follow-up to the crime mystery series 100 Bullets, which I read last year for the first time and I thought was very, very good. This follow-up, though, significantly less good than 100 Bullets. It felt completely unnecessary to me, but it wasn't absolute garbage or anything, so if you just really have a hankering for more stuff that's even slightly like 100 Bullets, you can check this out if you want. And I read most of The Walking Dead. I'm still working my way through this last book here, but what I've read of The Walking Dead I've really liked. I watched the show back in the day up until it got really bad, and then I kept watching it for a little bit before eventually giving up. And in some ways, the show, I'd say, is better than the comic, but the comic's better than the show in other ways. And then once you get to the point in the comic where it matches up to about season 7 or so, the comic's just better in every way. You know, that's how it is. So I'm happy to be going through this series, and I'm looking forward to finishing it soon. Infinite Crisis, the Omnibus. So if you read comics, you know that events in general are normally very frustrating and unnecessary and annoying, but Infinite Crisis is a big exception to that. Most events have really unnecessary tie-ins that don't add anything, but this one, all the tie-ins are actually like really good and enhance the main story a lot. Well, not all the tie-ins. That Rand Thanagar war stuff was kind of junk, but everything else in here was really good, and it all enhances the story. And this is just a big ol', you know, this is a chonker of a book right here, but it's all one cohesive narrative, and I felt like it was very well done. This is one of the few events that I'd say is worth fully reading with all the tie-ins and everything. Batman 3 Jokers, this was all right. I don't really remember much about it, except that it had good art and there was 3 Jokers in it. But I do think this isn't canon, right? This is a non-canon thing. So I do remember there being some questionable stuff in here. You know, not like questionable, but just like questionable, you know. And if it's non-canon, that's fine. But if it's canon, I'd find that not, I don't know. I wouldn't care too much, but it would slightly bother me. Next up, I have this hodgepodge of random Batman event books from the 90s. This is Sword of Azrael. This is a prelude to the Nightfall arc, which I read back when I was a teenager, but I never read this prelude stuff that introduces Azrael. Look how cool this guy looks. People hate on this guy, but he looks so sick. Look at him. So I read that. And then Troika, this is like an epilogue to the Nightfall arc that I also never read. So I checked that out. And then Contagion, this was the follow-up to the Nightfall arc that I didn't read, where Gotham City, they all get sick. And that was fun. And then, I got Batman versus Bane. And Legacy Volume 1. So Legacy, this is another Batman event. It has 2 volumes. Volume 2 was really out of print and super expensive. So I got this Batman versus Bane book instead of Volume 2 because this has like half of Volume 2 in it. And I can't afford the second volume. So this is the best I can do with that. But this Bane stuff was really fun. I enjoyed that. Batman Year 100. I remember this was one of the first Batman things I ever tried to read back when I was in high school. And this was just going way over my head at the time because this is like a futuristic, post-apocalyptic Batman story. Well, not post-apocalyptic, but dystopian, I'd say. It's a dystopian Batman. And this was just not... high school me, who'd never read any Batman before, was not comprehending this. So I decided all these years later to finally go back and finish reading this. Now that I'm a more seasoned Batman veteran. And, I liked it. It was pretty good. I dug it. Grant Morrison's Batman runs. This is considered by a lot of people to be the best Batman run of all time. And I read about half of it years ago. And I decided this year that I'd go back and read all the parts that I hadn't read yet, finish it up. So that's what I did. I got Time in the Batman. I don't really remember what happened in this book, but I think it was all right. Oh, Return of Bruce Wayne. I did not care for this at all. It's like Batman traveling through time, and he's a pirate and stuff. Oh, get that out of here. Didn't like that. Okay, Batman Incorporated. This was half good and half just too wacky for me. There was this particular Batman Incorporated, but these New 52 Batman Incorporated, these were pretty good. I liked both of these volumes a good bit. And then all the Grant Morrison stuff that I read previous to this year, Batman and Son, Batman R.I.P., Batman and Robin, The Black Glove, all of that rocks. That stuff is great. So if you've never read the Grant Morrison Batman, don't let this put you off or anything. Go check it out because it's mostly really good. I read Tom King's Batman too. This is controversial Batman series. I'm missing volume 5 of these hardcovers because it's out of print and super expensive. But okay, this series, this is very polarizing, and I just need to know how I felt about it. So I read it through, and I kind of see where the lovers and the haters are both coming from. I think that it's well written, but it's not a good take on Batman. Batman just acts very out of character throughout this whole thing, but there's a lot of the stories in here I think are individually pretty interesting, and I think Tom King shines especially in sort of the one-off stories he does in here, the little stories. Like, okay, there's this issue where Batman and Catwoman go on a double date with Superman and Lois Lane, and that's like the peak of this whole run. It's really fun. So the little stuff like that, really good. But there's some questionable things too. Tom King's a really nice guy though. He said that he liked my shirt one time, so I got to give him props for that. I finished the Green Lantern by Jeff Johns run. I actually read the first volume of this back in 2019, and I loved it a lot, but I was like, I just got to be in the perfect mood to finish this so I can have the best experience. And then 5 years went by, and I was like, I should probably finish that since I really liked it. And I did, and yeah, it's really great. I love it a lot. If you don't know anything about this, the basic premise of this run is Jeff Johns going like, okay, so we have Green Lanterns. What if there were lanterns for all the other colors and they fought each other? And it's actually really great, and it's like the best possible execution of that premise. It's awesome. It's awesome. So I read 2 of the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale Marvel Colors series, which is Hulk Gray and Daredevil Yellow, and these really big, really fancy editions. And if you haven't read any of these, the basic premise is that they take a superhero and they spend a whole book exploring this superhero being sad about their dead girlfriend, because there's a lot of Marvel heroes with dead girlfriends, and so that's what these are. These were both pretty good, but the best one in this series is Spider-Man Blue, which is about Spider-Man remembering Gwen Stacy, and that's one of the best comics I've ever read. It's very, very good. But I read that like 13 years ago, so I can't include that in this video. But here I am talking more about it than these ones that I actually read last year, so it is what it is. Animal Man by Grant Morrison. This is an all-time classic. Really creative, mind-bending series that does some fourth wall stuff that's really interesting. If you read this, it starts out pretty normal for the first 4 issues. Like, it's good, but it's normal. And then the 5th issue is this absolutely bonkers meta story about this, like, Wile E. Coyote stand-in where all this crazy stuff happens. And once you get to that issue, you'll know what you're in for here. This was one of the best things I read last year. I think this is Grant Morrison's best work that I've read so far. I read all these really old Spider-Man comics. So I'd read the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko run, the very first, I think 38 issues of Spider-Man. I read that back when I was in high school. Loved it. And now that I'm older, I've been worrying. I'm like, ooh, I loved old Spider-Man a lot. Will I still love it now that I'm like an adult and stuff? And so I went back and I picked up where I left off, and I read up to, this is like the mid-70s. So I read from the mid-60s to the mid-70s, all of Spider-Man, basically. And I dug it a lot. I finished up all the Stan Lee, John Romita stuff, got into the Gary Conway, and this has just been a whole lot of fun. Maybe the best comic book related thing I read last year, although there's some tough contenders for sure, but this was just a blast. And then last but definitely not least, I read a really big chunk of Chris Claremont's run on X-Men. This is the definitive X-Men run. He basically made these characters into who we know them as today. And this was, I read basically up from the mid 1970s to like the late 80s basically, which was, it was all this. It's a lot of stuff. And I thought it was really great. I'd read a lot of these issues when I was a kid, and it was great going back and reading them all in order and stuff, because I just had random single issues out of order. It was just nice being like, oh, that's why that happened, and just having the full context for everything. But yeah, I mean, this is old. There's a lot of dialogue in here. The characters explain their powers in every issue and monologue during fight scenes about what all their moves do. But overall, I think that this is just one of the best comic book runs of all time. Very good character exploration here. Some of the best story arcs in all of comics. You got the Dark Phoenix saga, Days of Future Past, God Loves, Man Kills, the Wolverine miniseries, the Proteus saga, the From the Ashes. I could just go on and on naming X-Men related stories for who knows how long. But yeah, this is just, I need to stop, or I'm just gonna keep going forever. This is really good. All right, I think that's everything. So thanks for watching all this. If you made it to the end of this video, thanks so much. I really appreciate you watching all this. Hope you have a good day. Go have an excellent rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Wait, never mind. I just remembered I also read Killer Be Killed by Ed Brubaker. It was pretty good. Go check that out. Anyway, all right. See you later.